and the events, and then I'll turn it over to you, Chris.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, so this is an event that is a cooperation between several organizations. PATCA, which is organization for consultants, and they are actually hosting the panel. The ACM, are providing part of the infrastructure for this, and then AI Camp is providing the actual Zoom for this. Our organization, the SF Bay ACM, has been around in the Bay Area for about 50 years or more.
62 years. 63 years.
Anyway, a bunch of years, 63, okay. And we put on events like this, public events. We try to put them on twice a month. One on the third Wednesday of each month, which is a general computing, anything related to computing, and one on the fourth Monday, generally, of the month, which is related to big data, data mining, AI, machine learning, any of those big data type things. And we have a couple of things coming up. Let's see, on the 22nd, which is Monday, we have Deep Networks, our kernel machines, and you can look at our meetup page to see how to get to that. And then the organization who's providing the Zoom for us tonight is AI Camp, and they have a free half-day interactive event with AI and machine learning leaders from Google, Facebook, Academia, Goldman Sachs, and Anthem Insurance. And we have sent out to everybody on our list of meetup people an announcement of that event with the details for it. So you should have received that. And SFAACM is a totally nonprofit and volunteer-run organization. If you would like to help us run our organization and set up events and give you an opportunity to meet people throughout the industry through this mechanism of setting up events, we certainly welcome you to do that. Please go to either our meetup page or to our web page, which is sfbayacm.org, and contact us. And with having said that, I'm going to turn this over to Chris Hansen, who is the moderator for tonight's panel. Chris, you want to take it away?
All right, thank you, Bill. And I'm going to share my. I've got some slides here. I will set up and share, and I hope everyone can see those. Okay. So and thanks again. Thanks to the ACM and AI Camp for hosting tonight. And I hope I think we're going to have an interesting discussion. First, let me give a quick intro to PATCA. PATCA is the Professional and Technical Consultants Association. We're based here in Silicon Valley, but we're not exclusive to Silicon Valley. We have members all around the country, and we're an organization that's designed to help consultants and help their businesses. And basically, we work together to share ideas. We have a website, newsletter, and so forth. You can check out our website and learn a little bit more about us there. One of the main things that we do that's helpful for consultants is that we help with advertising and marketing. We have a new consultants roundtable that meets every month now on Zoom since the pandemic. And we have a poster project where companies that have projects where they're looking for consultants will share them, and then those are those are shared with PACA members. So for the panel tonight, I believe everyone is on. I'm not sure if Omar has joined us yet, but he should be on shortly. Our panel tonight is, I'm going to go through the slide decks. We have introductions, and when I get to each panelist's name, let me please step up and introduce yourself. I'll start here. My name is Chris Hansen. I have a consulting company called Covariant Corporation. It's based in around the Sunnyvale area, and most of my consulting work is in the area of Wi-Fi, and my background is in physical layer for Wi-Fi, and that's that's really what I do, and I've been consulting for about 8 years now. So I'll jump ahead. I think next up is Perry. Can you introduce yourself, Perry?
Oh, yes. Thank you, Chris. My company is Automated Vision Systems. It's been around for 40 years in the consulting business. Principally, I do application development in the area of machine vision for OEMs and system integrators, some marketing studies, and a fair amount of education and training. So myself, I founded this 40 years ago this month. So kind of may make a career out of it. In 2003, I was given the Machine Vision Association of SME's Chairman's Award. And in 1990, I was given the AIA's Annual Achievement Award. The AIA is the trade association. I'm also a certified vision professional at the advanced level for machine vision.
Great. All right, thanks, Perry. I'm going to jump ahead now to Omar Khalid. Go ahead, Omar. Introduce yourself.
Hello. Hi. My name is Omar Khalid. My company is Vortex Innovation Labs. I'm based in Dublin, California. I've been consulting for the past 20 years. For the past 10 years. I've been a software developer for the past 20 years. Before consulting, I was working as a software developer, a lead software developer in the areas of network monitoring, network IDS, intrusion detection system for large-scale deployment, like for utility companies and governmental organizations. So I ventured into consulting 10 years ago, started out with working in software development in terms of virtualization of the compute and networking that later progressed to cloud computing. And today I'm mainly consulting in the areas of cloud related large scale systems. So I help clients build scalable, stable system, designing microservices and cloud native architectures. Mainly in the Silicon Valley area. That's
great.
Yeah.
Thanks. And then up next is I think is Jerry. And Jerry, I've got 2 slides for you. So just tell me when you want me to switch to the second one.
Okay, well, yeah, I couldn't fit them on one. But I've been consulting. I started my consulting practice. The company is FabNexus, and I started it 35 years ago, or actually a little bit over 35 years ago. And I primarily do development sort of at the lower level of industrial control, machine automation. In recent years, I've done quite a bit of development for medical and scientific instrumentation. For a couple decades, I was fairly heavily involved in semiconductor processing machinery when Silicon Valley was really Silicon Valley, which it's not so much anymore. You can go to the next slide now.
Okay, go ahead. Okay.
Yeah, I started out fresh out of college and worked for a couple of high-tech companies. One is Digital Equipment Corporation, which for probably the younger professionals that are on the call may not even know who they are, but they were the #2 computer company, second to IBM for a couple decades back in the 70s, 80s, and into the 90s. And then after that, I worked for Timeshare, which was actually a joint company, Timeshare TimeNet, which at the time were based over in Cupertino near Apple's original headquarters, and did network protocols and other network related software development at that time. And so, as I mentioned earlier, I formed my practice in '82, and that's it.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jerry. And then we'll jump ahead to Rafa.
Hello, everybody. My name is Rafa Baca, and I've been a professional for about 20 years. I have a very varied consulting in terms of the types of industries that I have been consulting in, primarily in the software and engineering field. I specialize in natural language processing. I've also done some consulting in the fintech space for security and decentralized computing. In addition to that, in addition to the software consulting, I have a background in engineering, and I've also done legal consulting as well. My mantra has always been to always, try to be unique and true to yourself and keep an open mind to new experiences. I initially started out as an engineer in the patent office. One thing led to another. I went to law school. Then after that, through something called Discovery, I learned about computing techniques called e-discovery, like to get evidence that's in your cell phones. And I decided I love coding. And one thing led to another, and I completed my degrees in software. I want to give a shout out definitely to Patka. The one thing that I think that was not mentioned is there is no brokerage fees. There's no fees. So it gives everyone the opportunity on equal footing, and there's no middle person to broker. So you can hold out your shingle and get ready to consult on your own. I've also provided some links. Well, hopefully during the course of the evening, we can refer to them, and maybe some of the proctors might be able to cut and paste them in the chat as well. Lastly, I'm interested, and my new passion right now is to create a uniform code of ethics for digital ethics in the profession, and that is through the Digital Deputy. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Rafa. And so now we're going to jump into the questions part. We have I have a set of questions that we put together to kind of get the roundtable started, and then we're gonna take in questions from the audience as we get going. So I guess we'll switch formats here. I'm gonna stop sharing the screen, and then we can just go to seeing everyone and so forth. And so I'll start with the first question, and then maybe I'll start with Perry and go around. How has your practice evolved over time, Perry? But how would you say that your practice?
Well, how has it evolved? Basically, I started out when I started out, there wasn't much in the way of the industry I'm in. Machine vision was very new. There wasn't much going on, so I kind of had it to myself, but nobody knew what it was. A lot of my customers were east of the Mississippi in the Rust Belt industrial sector, so there was a lot of travel. As time has gone on, more and more the clients have shifted to the West Coast, where it's convenient. There are more people in the industry, more competition. I was building up the practice and had employees and leased space, and I realized one day that would be a big mistake, that a lot of overhead. I was working very hard to make sure I could pay the salaries and the overhead, and I figured I could do just as well or better by just being a one-person consultancy. So I closed the office down, let the people go, and moved the business home, which is a very painful decision and one of the best decisions that I've ever made. I have no regrets. So I deal now mostly with OEMs and system integrators, and not so much with end users.
Great. Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, I'm gonna jump to Omar and say, how has your practice evolved over time? What's changed, or what have you found is new or different than when you
But
started?
yeah, sure. So when I started, I came from an employee background. I worked for a company for 10 years. And, there was some, I ventured out from the company with the intent to try something new. Now, I didn't, my intention was not to swing by to commit to another company. I didn't want to commit. So I just want to see, I felt that I was working in the company for 10 years for too long. And I felt that even though I'm a tech lead in that company, I felt that my scope and my expertise were pretty much limited to what the company that I was working for was doing. So it's just, I like technology. I know that things are going on in Silicon Valley, and a lot of exciting things people are working on. So I just want to get out there and just get involved. So I started out contracting for short contracts here and there, and learning new things that was going on. And over time, I was picking up more skills and more experience in terms of even like how project was executed, what worked, what didn't work, and get to know more and more people. And over time, I find that the experience that I gained from working in various projects, both in terms of technical and non-technical aspect, became a very valuable very valuable element in terms of what I can provide as a service. And that's how I think it has progressed to. Right now, I think how it evolves right now is that my clients are looking at me as the person which they come in to solve an architectural problem, a real picture.
Yeah.
I think that's how it has evolved to over the years. And how I'm getting my clients now. Because of the connections that I've gathered throughout the years, I've managed to get my company registered as a vendor to one big Silicon Valley company and all, and I'm able to handle multiple clients nowadays. So yes, evolved in that way.
Good. All right, so we'll go around the room here. Jerry, how has your practice evolved over time?
Well, initially, I did start out as an independent doing software development on contract strictly by myself. But over the next, this was back in the 80s, for a number of years, I actually ramped my practice up some and brought in some subcontractors. And then at one point in the early 2000s, I decided to sort of revamp myself and go through developing a software product and not just sell services, but sell products. And I brought in a partner and restructured my business, not just for myself, but for my partner and our support people. And as is the case with many startups, didn't work out the way I wanted. So the revenue wasn't there. So I hit the reset button back in about 2008 and started back into my independent service-oriented business again. And of course, there are the obvious things about how the technology has evolved. Back in the 80s, I started out, almost all software development was done with a big 3-ring binder, or actually multiple 3-ring binders in front of myself. And then as the internet came into creation, today very few people use hard copy manuals. So there's those sorts of things. But I guess that pretty much sums it up for me.
Good. And Rafa, so same question. I think you answered a little bit of this on your introduction, but maybe you can elaborate some more on how your practice has evolved over time.
Perhaps a little perspective to that too. I think at the end of the day, it evolved as I evolved personally, individually, professionally, right? I think I've always been a curious person. I've always been interested in how things work. So as we've alluded to already, is that there is one thing that I do want to comment on, that is in both situations, in the technical situation and both in the legal situation, I did start out initially getting a lot of training through the government, through corporations, and through large law firms. But then ultimately, it's you make a personal decision too. Is there's only so much that I think that you can get trained on, so to speak, and then thereafter, it's you ask the question, can I do this, and can I find some more interesting clients and topics, right? So as it was, at least in software, for example, I was doing quite a lot of data analytics projects in the beginning. In the legal space, in terms of discovery, then it has just developed out into what it is right now, where we're actually building contract and document workflows, right, based on AI. I think this is something that is a gradual situation, but it's something that I personally have always been interested in. Again, it's I would say that being a consultant, it may not be for everyone, but the benefits are that you can pursue your own interests. Your time is different, so perhaps if you want to segment certain times of the day that aren't necessarily traditional to work on, and versus other times of the day, or even week for that matter, there's a lot of benefit to that. So I think in general, it has evolved as I have, my own personal interests has evolved, but at the end of the day, I'm so much more happier for it.
Good. Yeah, no, I that makes a lot of sense. I think my experience and a lot of folks has been that, people who like doing consulting. I mean, people who do consulting like it. It's definitely fun. And so I'm gonna jump around a little different order now. We have a few more questions, and we'll take some questions from the audience. I guess, and I'll start with, I'm gonna put Jerry on the spot with this one first. So put things out of order. What is one thing you wish you had known when you started consulting that you know now, but you wish you had known when you had started so many years ago?
Actually, it's easier for me to answer that in the inverse, and that is the thing that I'm glad I didn't know when I started consulting is the challenge that would eventually arise in how to find new business. When I started, I was fairly young and very optimistic, and very ambitious, and it worked out well for the first few years. But then at some point, I had to actually start doing business development, and it was sort of tough. As far as what I wish I had, well, obviously I wish I knew everything I know now when I started, as far as technical information and how the market's evolved and that sort of thing. But I don't know that there's not one thing that I can actually point to that jumps to mind. Maybe someone else can come up with something more clever.
Fair enough. Okay. All right. Well, I'm gonna put Omar on the spot then with this one. So, what's one thing you wish you had known when you had started? Is there?
Well, one thing I wish I've known, and I wish I didn't take it for granted in the early stages, was to nurture the connection base. I think in the first few years after I moved from one client to another, I kind of like didn't keep in touch with those guys, with the people who I was working for in the previous projects. And I think it is good to, now I'm doing that. But before, if I had just maintained a connection with them, keep on engaging with them every now and then, and I think because people move, people change careers, they go to another company, and if you have them, you have yourself fresh in their minds, they will think of you when they have a problem to solve. You'll be fresh in their minds, and they feel more confident that you are still there and around. So if they start forgetting about you, and the confidence and the remembrance of it, how much they think about you, is correlated. So if they haven't heard from me for 5 years, and suddenly I ping them, I think that there's a decrease in confidence there in terms of what happened to him, is it still, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
So
maintaining communications is
maintaining
with clients is
communication.
important.
Yeah, I think I should have done that sooner, and yeah.
Now you know. That's
now I know.
a good point.
Yeah.
Rafa, what if you had, one thing you wish you'd done when you started consulting that now you know after doing it for a while?
Well, first of all, I have to give the props already to Jerry and Omar in terms of the two main things are definitely, as they indicated, marketing, right?
Mhm.
And I think Omar had mentioned networking, how important that is. I think what kind of binds the two is something that I wish I didn't know as a young engineer when I first got out, and is actually just being able to better communicate. And in terms of public speaking, there through Hard Knocks, and I've actually provided the link there too.
Mhm.
There's I learned public speaking through Toastmasters, which I have. So I posted Silicon Valley Toastmasters. The beauty of Toastmasters is not only it helps, at least for technical types, right, that you need to kind of get out of your shell. I don't necessarily think that we should aspire to be, backslapping extroverts in all occasions, but just the fact that the best thing I think about with public speaking, with networking, and with marketing, you all find out that at the end of the day, it is a skill that can be practiced and learned, but again, it is a skill. So in terms of public speaking, that's part, and being able to speak under a big audience, to get over that fear, that's the easy part. I think another thing that is definitely important about public speaking and being able to communicate, whether your client is in the the C-suite or an individual startup, right? You need to be able to effectively communicate. So again, speaking in front of an audience is important, but the other thing too is being able to mentally craft what you want to say and craft it and say it in the right way that it is accurate and concise. I think a lot of people do appreciate that at the end, and it comes across as highly professional. That's my 2 cents.
Mm-hmm. Good point. Okay, it's your turn, Perry. So what's one thing you wish you had known when you started consulting that you know?
Well, the one thing I'd known is how many things I needed to know. I will underscore what's been said before about marketing, networking, and Toastmasters too. I enjoyed Toastmasters until I started consulting, and then I was traveling too much and couldn't make the meeting, so I had to drop out. But it's really worth it. I agree with that completely. I think a talk I attended years ago while I was consulting by Ann Winblad, who's a venture capitalist, Hummer Winblad. She got up and she said, "Okay, you're all here to listen to me to know how to get money from me." That was true. And she said, first of all, in simple world, there are investment grade businesses and lifestyle businesses. We don't invest in lifestyle businesses. We don't want to finance your lifestyle. We're venture capitalists. You've got to run it. We're only interested in investment grade. Well, I realized my consulting business, mine, was never going to be a Bechtel or anything like that. It was never going to be investment grade. But I, like a lot of others, had come out of corporate world, and I was running my business the way it would be run in the corporate world, as if it were investment grade. And I scheduled myself and I gave my priorities that way, realizing all of a sudden that no, it's a lifestyle business, and I've got to adapt it and make it work still service the clients, still service the business, but be in a lifestyle business. That was a big change, and it's made a huge difference. When I started the business 40 years ago, I had a young family, and the business took me away from them too much. I really wish I had, realized it was a lifestyle business and adjusted myself accordingly. I would have been happier then. I'm certainly happier now with that.
That's an interesting point. That's an interesting point. And I think that one thing I think that we've all sort of touched on in this topic is understanding that one of the differences between consulting and working for another company is that you're starting a business, and even if it's only like the business side is only a small fraction of your time, because most of your energy is actually going into helping your clients. You still it's still critical that you know how to run a business, and that you get that, and I think that that's something that all of us all of us or almost all of us wish we'd known a little bit more about when we started and joined in. I can think of like one little thing, my own is QuickBooks is a tool used for finance. It's like, yeah, I wish I had taught myself how to use QuickBooks before I needed to use it, right? Things like that. So I think that's a good point. So, okay,
Chris, if I may.
Yeah, go. Yeah, jump in,
Yeah,
Rafa.
just
Mhm.
real quick is,
Mhm.
as you had mentioned, that's actually profoundly important. Again, that is something they don't teach in engineering or law, how to start your own business. And so I actually did put a link up there too on the slide
Mhm.
of the Silicon Valley SBDC. What is the SBDC? Small Business Development Center. It's actually run by the US Department of Commerce with our tax funding. But at the end of the day, is what they do is it's a one-stop shop for all these things, whether you need to learn about bookkeeping or just even setting up your DBAs. They do a market study. They also, there's something that the MBA types, they have a business plan. In fact, including myself, in the past have there some of it is actually paid employees in this government entity, but also there's volunteers, and I myself had done that in the past, where you critique business plans. So essentially, this is something that I think a lot of consultants may not know about, but it's definite. And the great thing about this is that it is free. Or there might be some nominal charge for like pre-pandemic or post-pandemic donuts, or making copies, or something like that. But I strongly encourage anyone who is probably thinking about it is to gain your skills that way, and you can't go wrong with free.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, we're gonna switch gears now. I've gone through a bunch of the questions that I had prepared from PACA, and we've gotten a couple of audience questions in here. So I'm going to start. Maybe I'll since switching up the order again. Maybe I'll jump back to Rafa for a second here, and you can be first on this one. And this one is, how much effort do you have to devote to business development proposals and sales? Like in your business, how much of your effort goes into those three? So is it just, maybe say just in terms of business development and you find sales and stuff?
I think there's a smart way to do it, and I'm glad you picked me first, because in the
Okay.
very beginning I really didn't know the smart way. But if you could do it cheaply and effectively, the probably the best way to do that is through search engine optimization. And I'm sure we've all heard of that, which is SEO in your website. Another thing is your newsletters. I think Omar had also mentioned, just the ability to kind of reach out to your potential customers and client base. So newsletters are one way to be very effective. And then the other thing is, doing presentations. If you're the world expert, on embedded systems for, I don't know, IoT, right? You get out there and, you offer to do some presentations and get your name out there. Those are some ideas, but I'm not good. I think Jerry had mentioned, I believe, was that, I'm sorry, Perry, is that it is a lifestyle, right? So there is going to be some quote downtime, which basically means that you're going to have to work on the business aspect. But again, there's, as I've indicated, provided some suggestions, there are ways to kind of do that more effectively so that you can have your quality time, right? Your lifestyle.
Yeah, that's a good point. Jerry, I'll put you're next here. So how much effort do you put on business development and proposals, sales, other generating new business for your company?
Well, the way I approach it is if I'm flush with work, I obviously I try to do things that have more long-term effect. But if I've got some downtime, I'll be more proactive in terms of going out and doing things, sort of flushing out leads and that sort of thing. And it has also to do with how many projects I can carry at one time, since some of my development projects are fairly in-depth and lengthy projects. At most, I can generally only do a couple projects at a time. So that impacts how much active business development I'll do in any given period of time. So it just varies based on what the current economic situation is, and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm. That's good. Omar, how much time do you spend, or how much energy do you spend on business development, proposals, and sales?
Yeah. So throughout the years that I've been doing this, I don't really have a downtime that I didn't plan for. My downtime has always been my vacation that I've planned, and I've cleared my calendar of everything. So yeah, I don't really have that, they call it feast and famine kind of situation so far. Okay. But yeah, so the mistakes that I have in the early stages of my practice is that I didn't pay attention enough to the marketing aspect, the brand building, and everything. And now I'm learning it's not a good idea to kind of like cramp it all in one period of time as well. So what I'm doing now is that I dedicate a day on Monday, half a day every Monday, just do something for the marketing, reaching out to people, writing materials, marketing materials, So that has been the routine that I'm trying to get into a cadence on.
That's good.
Yeah.
And Perry, your turn now. Jump in. What how much effort do you put in business development, sales, and proposals?
It goes, I would say, my guess is about 25%. Now, that's not all customer facing directly. Some of it is there, proposals to write, this sort of thing. There's some prospecting, but I do a lot of other things. I write papers, post them online. I've done a lot of online videos, and I give webinars and webcasts. I speak, I teach courses for professional associations. All of that gets rolled into business development and being present in front of potential clients. And so I would say probably 25% of my time roughly is rolled into all of those activities. And one of the key things in doing writing and videos and training is make sure you get in front of the right audience. If you're speaking to your competitors, if you're a programmer and you're talking at ACM, for example, most of the people there are probably your colleagues, and you may get some referrals. And by the way, I have gotten referrals out of PATCA. Okay, it's been valuable, and I include that. I include volunteer time too for organizations as part of my business development. All of that wrapped in, it comes to about 25%.
Yeah. And I think this is a good point in terms of talking about a percentage or a certain amount of time in the week in consulting that we haven't really talked about, which is kind of the flip side. So when you're not doing business development, how much time are you actually billing to clients or billing to other folks, and obviously when you're doing this business development activity, you're not, and so I think that's a good point. Did anyone else want to comment? Maybe I'll you know, put Jerry on the spot on this one. You know, how many, you know, are you able to bill, you know, you know, what percentage of your working time do you think you bill to clients, or would you say?
Well, historically, it's been very similar to what Omar mentioned earlier. I've had little downtime. When I first started consulting back in the early 80s, I had one gap of about 6 weeks when I was between projects, and I was doing a lot of business development during that time. Since then, I've primarily been pretty much consistently occupied, fully subscribed, except for times when I scheduled, you know, vacation travel time, personal travel time. But I will mention that earlier this year, in July, when the pandemic started, back when it sort of first hit the radar back in around the end of January, mid-February, early March, whenever it was, I was actively engaged in a very intense project, software development project, and that continued through the end of June. But it ended at that time, at the, you know, effectively the beginning of July, and things went pretty silent for about 5 months, and that was the longest time in my almost 40 years of consulting that I had been down for that much time. Of course, the pandemic is a sort of a once in a century event, so not surprising. But since actually for the I'm fully subscribed again. I have been for the last couple months, so it's worked out quite well. And I should mention, and this kind of tracks what Omar was saying, I do marketing material development, things for my website, generally on the weekends. I don't do it during bill. I usually bill Monday through Friday, and then I do spend some time on the weekends doing you know, marketing collateral development and that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, I've got some other questions here. I'm gonna take them in and kind of toss them around a little bit. So I guess one of the questions was, you know, can you please contrast consulting versus contracting? A lot of people that contract say they're consultants, and you know, what are the pros and cons of each? I'll say, Perry, you want to start off on this topic? Do you have a opinion on consulting versus contracting, or?
Or I have an opinion on just about everything.
All right.
So contractors, first of all, they're not necessarily as differentiated from their competitors as consultants are. So a contractor has a good skill set, but there's usually a spectrum, a range of people out there that could do the same work. They're just getting, it's like a temporary job. They get it, and they typically will work 100% of their time for a client until the project is finished and then move on. A consultant, on the other hand, usually has some unique skill, something that makes them not so interchangeable with other people. And they tend to, at least in my view, work with several clients at a time. So I like to be between 2 and 4, 3 being a sweet number to keep things busy. That said, sometimes a client needs 100% of my time for a week or two for a real rush project. But ordinarily, I like to be working with several clients at one time.
Mm-hmm. Rafa, do you have anything to add, or do you have an opinion on?
I do. Perry said a lot of great stuff. There are some things. Definitely, when you're consulting, as he indicated, you never want to put your eggs in one basket. Definitely from a business standpoint, and contracting is probably a great example. But with consulting, you also want to kind of stand out. Definitely. So you might want to be that lawyer who knows software, or that software engineer who happens to be a lawyer. You kind of stick out, right? And people kind of remember you that way. Whereas with this contracting, though, there's some good and bad with it, but I'm a little bit hesitant to take on full on contracts in the sense that it requires almost all of your time. The tendency when you switch over to other clients, there's probably going to be some downtime, and you never really want that ultimately from a business standpoint. So
Right.
those
Yeah.
are just two things that I wanted just to kind of piggyback on Perry, but I think he hit it on the head.
Good, good. Okay, so we did get a question about insurance, and I was gonna maybe I'll read this one out, and then we can. I have a few thoughts on this one, but I'll go around the roundtable kind of first on that. And it says, what as a consultant, what kind of insurance do you need to have? Is there such a thing as insurance for a software development project? So maybe I'll toss it to Omar first and see if you have any thoughts on this, or is there for insurance, any comments on insurance for a consulting business? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I have insurance, the general liability and all this stuff. I'm sorry, I don't have the details in my head about it.
No, that's
but
fine.
I have an agent. I have an agent that handles that and all. Yeah, but I have the whole insurance thing, and it's required by several of my clients anyway. So I need to get them. So that's the way up it for me. Yeah.
Jerry, any thoughts on insurance?
Well, when that question usually comes up, I agree with exactly what Omar said about the general liability. I think most consultants and contractors they're doing software these days need general business liability, as well as in certain cases they need workers' comp and just other standard business insurance. But when it comes to errors and omissions, it's a little bit of a tricky thing. And first of all, it can be quite expensive, and it also can have it can be such that you actually, by getting it, you may actually be attracting lawsuits. So I've generally avoided the whole errors and omission insurance approach in my 30 plus years of consulting. I've actually avoided it the whole time, and I think most of my colleagues have done the same.
I guess that's a good point. In that I think most people, almost everyone who runs has their own consulting business, probably has basic business insurance, which actually is quite inexpensive if you're a small business, which covers liability and things like that. It's been my experience. I have had clients that required errors and omissions insurance that's in the contract that you have with them, and that can be as Jerry mentioned, that can be a hassle to find and even to get the right policy, because sometimes you have to explain to an insurance agency what kind of work you do, and they don't understand technology, and like my experience is I don't understand insurance, and it takes some effort there. My experience was that companies that specialize in insurance for businesses, business insurance companies, are the knowledgeable ones, and that's was worked out for me in that case when I needed it. So any other thoughts on insurance, folks? Rafa or Perry, any thoughts?
Yeah, I'd like to
jump in
a little bit, if I may. First of all, general liability, yes, I have it. That covers slips and falls and other things like that. It doesn't cover if you mess up a project. That's errors and omissions. And I have had about every 5 years, I get a client that wants me to have errors and omissions. And what I say is, okay, I don't have it, but I'll get it, but I'll have to add the cost onto this project because none of my other clients require it. And it's really expensive. So if you want it, let me know, and we'll work it. In every single case, they've dropped that requirement. They don't want to pay for it. Right. So I just used a little bit of leverage. Now, there's something else that comes up in workers' compensation. I have workers' compensation. Some clients want a certificate that you're covered. And as the owner, you can actually exclude yourself. So you're paying something you're paying for the privilege of sending them a certificate, but you're not getting coverage. Here's the thing to keep in mind. If you are injured on the job, your medical insurance likely won't pay if they find out. So you'll be going uncovered. When I had Kaiser, every time there was an injury, were you on the job? Were you working? What was going on? They checked up on that. So I've actually workers' compensation because I have a minimum premium. I say, cover me. That way, if I am injured on the job, I've got medical insurance.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, you're at risk if you don't do that.
Could I ask, actually, I'd like to interject and actually ask Perry a question.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
For us old codgers who are actually on Medicare now, is that a escape hatch for that? Because will Medicare exclude you if you have a work-related injury?
I'm sorry, Jerry, but to the best of my knowledge, no, because when I had Kaiser, it was Medicare.
Oh, really?
And they were always very careful to query me about that.
Okay.
And yeah, I know of one instance where a person was doing some work as a part-time, I'll call him a contractor, and he was exposed to hepatitis B and had to go through months of training. He was a school teacher, and his insurance for the school said, nope, we don't cover that. You were working somewhere else, not on the job. So insurance companies make money by charging you premiums and not paying claims.
Sounds
Okay,
like
so that's how they make money.
That's an interesting one. All right, I've got another question here, and this is a great one. This is a great one for all consultants, and I don't know who to start. Maybe I'll start with Rafa on this one. So I'll put you on the spot, Rafa. How do you deal with difficult clients? How do you? This is. Any thoughts on that one? You don't have to answer. We can go around if you don't. If you've only had positive experiences with clients, then
they've been positive. Well, first of all, you pick and choose your client.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I think at the end of the day, and that only comes with, unfortunately, it comes with hard knocks. It's a learning experience to pick and choose your own client. Usually, depending on the situation, sometimes it works as you kind of price them out of the price them out of the situation. But if it's actually, so that's if a client is actually coming and knocking at your door. If somehow unfortunately, if a client relationship just goes bad or it goes south, and there are, at least from the software standpoint, it's a lot easier to say, well, we need to kind of part ways. It's that much easier. If you're being in the legals, there's actually a large protocol that must be abided by. But at the end of the day, I think the moral of the story is you pick and choose your clients.
Yeah, that's good. Omar, any thoughts on this one? Difficult clients or?
Sorry, what the question again?
Okay. How do you deal with a difficult client? Say a client that has hired you but creates some trouble, or
I learned this the hard way. So for me, if a consulting project comes, okay, in a software industry, the software field, I try to get the contract, the scope as detailed as possible. They cannot be vague. The problem is that when things are vague, then they might move the milestone or making things difficult for you to complete the work because of some loopholes in the spec. So I think the best way is to get things really in detail, clarified on paper, agreed beforehand, before anything is done. And it takes a bit of thinking before you sign things off with them on what exactly that I'm supposed to do. But that is more on the specification of what needs to be done. But in terms of clients specifically, I don't have any much problem in terms of personal, personality-wise, in terms of interacting with them. Because I think when they engage me, I think with consultants in general, they have a genuine problem, they have a genuine issue that they want to solve, and as long as that's being addressed, I think they're okay. The problem that I have in terms of the personality side of things is when I was coming in as a contractor. So that's when I have a gray issue whereby as they're starting to not a stakeholder per se, but some of the employees kind of like have a relationship with me like I am someone who's trying to find a way to become an employee, someone who's trying to find a way to organization.
Competition, right?
The competition kind of
They
thing.
view
So
it as
for me,
competition.
for me, I actually I called them up and I said them, I'm not sure if this is advisable, but I did actually call them up for lunch with their supervisor, and then told them straight, look, I'm not here to compete with you or to get into I'm not here to get an employment here, anything like that. I'm here to do the job, and then I'm done. So I made that clear. I'm not into politics. I'm not pursuing an agenda. This is what you want. I will give you that, and then we're done. So that's pretty much, we set the base rule of things, and they don't bother me with whatever nonsense. So that's another set of things. But yeah, I mean,
it's good.
That thing has happened. Yeah.
Those are all valid points. Okay, we've got a couple more questions. I'm going to try to get a couple more in before we need to wrap up. So, and I'll toss this one out to Jerry. How do you charge for your projects? Time and materials, or fixed price, or what? How do you for your consulting? How does that work?
I over my career, I've primarily charged time and materials with, but generally coming in, you're asked for an estimate of what the statement of work is, and I do my best to give a optimistic yet realistic estimate. And that said, I actually am currently in discussions with, or not in discussions, but I mean I don't know, Perry, do you want me?
No, let's just leave it where you have it, Jerry.
Okay. Well, there is a project on the horizon that is a sort of a fixed price, and so do them occasionally.
Okay. What actually I was gonna ask you the same question, Perry. What any thoughts on this fixed price versus
Yeah, I do.
materials,
and just to be clear, Jerry did negotiate time and expenses. Okay, he stayed true to his value. And I work both ways. I think the key is, can I put my arms around the project? I mean, some projects are just too open-ended. There's no way you can bid it. Other things you can say, hey, I understand exactly how to do this, and the risk and uncertainty is small. I can manage it. I'll charge for the uncertainty and the risk as well as the work to be done, and give a fixed price. And go back, I think it was Omar mentioned the statement of work. Very, very key, whether either time and expenses or fixed price, to have that, but especially fixed price. And my statement of work basically has 3 parts. A description of the work I'm going to do, which is just sort of generic. It's not really specific. What I expect the client to provide, very specific. And then finally, the deliverables, very specific.
I think that's critical. Is making
those
sure
3 things are to me, those are the critical parts of the statement of work. And in a lot of cases, I've had cases where people say, well, we didn't get what we want. I'd say, well, let's look at the statement of work. Oh, you did it. You didn't say you were going to do that. Right, but we can talk about delivering this extra stuff, So I don't leave them out, but So I work both ways.
I mean, my personal experience has been I bill by the hour, just because I always wanted to avoid contract negotiations if I possibly can, right? Over, arguing over something being finished or not or whatever. But
Mhm.
but definitely clients like to have estimates, and estimates are good. Rafa, do you have an opinion on this? Time and materials versus
I do.
cost?
I think I think everything that's said has been said in a good way. There
Mhm.
is one thing I want to just let anyone know that is thinking about being a consultant is pricing is at times in art form. It's kind of hard to put some quantitative numbers in the beginning, but there are resources, and you kind of have to figure that out yourselves. But not quite. Actually, through I know depending on what industry you're in, sometimes they keep price guides. I know at least in the legal world, I'm in my patent world, we do have a price guide that comes out every 2 years by our association. Now, in the software world, though, I would recommend this. That again, I'm putting in a shameless plug for the US Small Business Development Center, but they do help you with, just doing a marketing study. But they do have an access to actuarial tables. Now, this is kind of, there's one way to do it. You can actually go through actuarial tables, and I'll explain that in a second. The other thing too is don't be afraid to ask around, right? Because at the end of the day here's the situation you don't want to be in. I've undercut myself. I put my price so low. I'm not happy. I'm not making any money. So you don't want to be in that situation whatsoever. So at least with the actuarial tables. Now, how does this work? Typically, you have insurance companies, and if you get hit by a truck, they kind of figure out how much you're worth, right? So there's ways to kind of extrapolate from those tables, and a lot of these business types, for example, the U.S. Small Business Development Center, they have subscriptions into services that kind of gain access along that way. The other thing too is just within, like Omar had mentioned, within your network, right? Just ask around. Don't be afraid to ask, because at the end of the day, it's about being able to be self-sufficient, to be happy at what you do. And the key thing is happy. If you're going to be hungry and angry because you have to do work all the time, there is a little bit of an art to it. And so it's not not easy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I
initially.
agree. Those are all good points. I have a few thoughts of my own on this topic of rate setting, and so I was gonna say, Omar, do you want to jump in? Anything on rate setting you would comment on, or?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the complexity of the work. It varies. I try to be reasonable. I read a lot of consulting books, and the people saying, price it with the value, sell the value, and then just give them a big number there because they're giving so much value and all those stuff. So I don't know how true is that. Maybe it's true to a certain aspect, but I try to see what's the market rate, and for the statement of work, I try to gauge how much time. I use hourly rate as my basis to give an estimate for a milestone. I may not spend that much hour doing it, but that's my method of pricing things.
Yeah, that's good. I just had a couple thoughts to personally chime in on here as far as like rate setting and other things. I mean, I'll plug PACA. One of the services PACA has is that we do a rate survey. Of course, we're not the only folks who do that. There are other resources out there. Rafa mentioned Small Business Development Center, the IEEE does their own rate survey. There are a number of folks out there. One thing to bear in mind, though, my experience has been looking at these rate surveys. If you see a rate survey that is nationwide versus a rate survey that's Silicon Valley, the nationwide rates are going to be a lot lower. And if you're here in Silicon Valley, yeah, you should be aiming for closer to Silicon Valley rates, because you got to pay Silicon Valley prices to live here. So it's pretty brutal. So Okay, so we're getting we got a bunch of questions. I'm going to try to tie a few of these together. A couple folks have asked about semiconductor industry and emerging technical fields with opportunities. So I'm gonna toss these around, and maybe I'll start with Perry this time. Emerging technical fields, things, semiconductors, software. What do you have any thought? What are things that you see growing or so forth?
Well, I can't speak too much about what's going on in the semiconductor field in terms of technology and the opportunities in the semiconductor industry. I did spend a few years at Fairchild Semiconductor, so I do have a background, but that's a lot of years ago. It's not at all current. In the technology area, there are a lot of things going on. I'm looking at as like about 5 million other people at artificial intelligence, deep learning, and this sort of thing. And I think this seems to be a lucrative place to do some consulting if you're looking for something. I think it's going to go through some pain in growing because I think it's being oversold and promises are being made that will not be fulfilled. Mm-hmm. And you're going to ride that horse, you're going to ride it up and you're going to ride it down. And then I think, and I saw this in my field of machine vision, mm-hmm. It went up, the promises were great, they weren't fulfilled, they went down. There were places that told, if you say that word, you were going to kick you out of here. They had too much pain. Mm-hmm. But I think at the end, it's going to emerge as something very, very interesting, but be careful if you decide to ride that. And that's probably true with a lot of technology.
Yeah. Jerry, any thoughts on that? Technologies rising, falling, or what's hot now? What do you see in your work?
Well, the semiconductor, I assume the question relates to software in semiconductor sector, or was it more for the hardware side?
Question was just semiconductors, or I can talk a little bit about hardware. You want to talk a little bit about software? Yeah. Okay.
Well, software is what I was going to mention is I see a number of what look like very interesting technologies that are emerging. One is potentially is the Rust programming language, which although it's been sort of out there for about 12, 14 years, it's only in the last 5 or 6 years really sort of reached some level of maturity in terms of the support for it, the compiler and the libraries, or they call them crates. But I think that there's some very interesting things that could potentially happen there. I know that Microsoft and Amazon and a few other companies are pursuing or investigating Rust, which is it was designed with the idea that it would be the future systems programming language that would succeed C in C++. So I'm sure some of the ACM members are familiar or aware of it. That and just other language technologies and also all the cloud and IoT things that are being done and being investigated. There's something even as simple as like the Amazon Alexa service, where you have voice activated capability in your home. You can have that now where you have actual devices throughout your home or potentially in a business environment where you can talk to your Alexa, interact through the cloud, and have these devices or machines within your facility actually do things based on voice commands that you give it. And Amazon has a SDK that they provide, and Google has a similar thing, but I'm more familiar with the Amazon version. So anyway, there are a lot of things, but those are the ones that come to mind to me.
I think that semiconductors obviously is what started in Silicon Valley, semiconductor industry is mature. Obviously we have to be honest about it. A lot of aspects of it are mature now, but there are always going to be opportunities in the same way there are always going to be opportunities designing software. Right? You're always going to need software. They're always going to people are always going to need chips for things, and there's plenty of work out there in terms of I know in terms of working on ASICs and other other development pieces of chips, whether they're in new hot AI areas or edge AI, other things like that. You see a lot of things, but even in I work in a more mature area, and Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, these areas, and people are doing chips. People are doing more and more companies are doing chips, or they're integrating these things into systems on chip ASICs and so forth. So there's work there. In consulting, and I would say that in there's a range of things, everything from people doing design work to verification, other sorts like things like that. So they're processor design. It's amazing that the big tech companies all do that. All do ARM processors of various kinds, and small folks, of course, are always integrating ARM cores onto chips, and so things on processor related problems are there as well. So we did get a question. Actually, this is a good question that we haven't touched on, and maybe we'll I'm going to toss this one out to Rafa first because he's got the legal background. IP aspects of consulting work. What kind of agreements do consultants tend to have to deal with for IP?
Well,
in
before I get
consulting?
into that, actually, I kind of wanted to bootstrap real briefly on the technical side.
Mhm.
At least from the advantage, I do have an advantage in the sense that, yes, I'm an IP attorney, but I'm also the American Bar Association Chair of Artificial Intelligence for 3 years running. And I can at least tell you at least some hot topics. And at hardware side, I would follow a lot of what NVIDIA is doing. They're doing a lot of, they initially started with graphic cards, GPUs, but that actually has been really great fodder for building neural nets on top of those, that kind of processing power. So definitely those guys, to me, they're like the rock stars in my opinion of what they're doing hardware wise. Another thing, actually, we're getting ready, at least with the American Bar Association, we're getting ready to create a new section, and I'm leading the way, and that's quantum computing. And one thing that I have to admit that's really cool is there seems to be, although quantum computing, I'd say, is in the industry, we're still about 20 years away, but there's still a lot of research in this one particular area, is at the fusion of quantum bit enhanced AI. I've seen that. That's really interesting. And then lastly, of course, is decentralized computing. I think that's another winner, in my opinion, from what I've seen, at least during the course of the pandemic. Who knows what's going to happen, a few years from now. But at least this is kind of in the last year or two that I've kind of seen, and I think is really cool stuff out there. Now, the other thing too is, although I'm coming as an individual contractor and I'm really the advocate for Digital Deputy, I can't necessarily give IP or legal advice
Okay.
in this
Yeah,
context.
fair enough. Yeah, fair enough.
But I would say consultant attorney. The other thing too, as even you don't even need to take my word for it, there's also kind of like self-help books in the law. There's a really good set of self-help books called, and it's out of Oakland, Berkeley, I think it's a Nolo Press.
Yep.
I would start with
Yeah.
those first before you kind of, talk to a full-blown attorney with your specific needs as opposed to general needs.
Right. Perry, any thoughts on IP? Any
Yeah,
IP agreements? Do you have to sign IP agreements when you do consulting
well,
work,
yeah,
or?
generally the consulting agreements usually
Yeah.
mean that the IP you develop belongs to the client. It's very unusual that that's not the case.
Mhm.
And in fact, it'd be a big red flag as to the client's maturity if they didn't look at that. Now, the
Yeah.
question, and that's pretty normal.
Mhm.
The question becomes one of, if you have IP that you might embed in the client's project. So you've developed something,
Yeah.
for example, Jerry has developed interface TCP/IP stacks and things for semiconductor that he developed independently. If he builds them into the client project, what is the client's right? I mean, he doesn't want to give away his IP.
Yeah.
But the client doesn't want to be in a situation where they can't produce their product.
Mhm.
So you may have to work through some of that. There's also something I heard about recently, and maybe Rafa, you can tell me, but it has to do with, it's not derivative rights, but it sounds like that. Basically, you may develop the IP, but you also know how to do that kind of work on the base, having done it for the client. So now you know how to go out and do that kind of work, not necessarily giving away that client's IP, but doing that. And that becomes kind of a sticky point sometimes. And that, I don't
Yes.
know, Rafa, if you can.
In fact, you have the right terminology. I can't really give legal advice, but in general, I think everything that you said is dead on. There is one other thing that I want to add, and this is not advice, but the topic I think that both Chris and Perry were talking about is a cooperative research and development agreement. That, there's agreements where you want to kind of cooperate, right? So, or to collaborate to develop something together. But again, it really boils down to just, first of all, I would suggest, just taking a look at, just familiarize yourself with that, that no-low press. And if there's any specific questions, then, the local bar, you can always get referrals that way if you need any help along those specific instances.
Chris, could
Yeah. Go ahead, Jerry.
yeah,
Do you have
there's
something
just
you want to add in that?
one other angle on this, which I
Mhm.
recently encountered at a client was using open source software for development for a client. In this particular case, it was the GUI Toolkit Qt,
Mhm.
which has both an open source license and a commercial license. And the client was not completely, well, the client, and it was somewhat of a learning experience for myself as well. We weren't entirely clear what the demarcation between legally using the open source without opening up the client software to being required by the GPL to be open source. And it turns out that there were a bunch of different parts of the Qt system, some of which were under the LGPL and the others were under GPL. And it turns out that the LGPL was more favorable. So anyway, there's a lot that, what I've learned from this one client experience is that when you get involved in a project that's using a non-pure, if it's using any sort of GPL licensing or non-free licensing, you really need to have the client have their own legal counsel with that, because it can cost you a lot of money to do the research yourself.
Yeah, that's true. And IP agreements, especially specialized IP agreements, can be very complicated and can be expensive. So that's something to, I think to look out for.
Well, there's another aspect to open source, and that is if the open source turns out to be an IP infringement in some way, who's liable? Most of the open source licenses say they're not liable. And so you could be setting up your client to have to defend themselves.
Yeah.
And I know there's companies, for example, Apple will not let you build any open source software into anything you deliver to them. Just they don't want the liability exposure.
It's an interesting point. This is IP is a topic that, I'm sure we could spend another whole hour on or something if we wanted to, but I think we are kind of running out of time, and I wanted to thank our audience for coming tonight, and I wanted to give every panel member a chance to do a kind of final wrap up. So maybe I'll just go around and say if there had any final comments. Maybe I'll start with Omar. Any final comments or things about consulting, or you'd like to say to our audience? Go ahead. You can.
Well, just want to touch a bit on the initial question on the contractor and the consultant thing. So I think that this kind of partitioning is a gray area. Okay, if even if what you consultant and contractor is what you call yourself, from the client's perspective, they just need someone to fix their problem. Now they might go to an agent and say, "Hey, get me someone with this skill sets, and bring him in, and we need to sort it out." Right? So we might come in as a contractor. All right. So for me, if that happens, okay, number one, I never sign into a W-2. I make it clear I'm not a W-2 for any company. I keep my independent status clear on each party in the transaction. And even if you go in that way, the difference is that when you engage the client, it's you and the client. So at that point, you are able to market yourself. You're able to build the basis for your service, for your identity. So, and even when you go and get your own client, it's always on a temporary basis anyway. You have a milestone. You're not there forever. You have a statement of work. You have something to deliver, and you're done. The project is concluded. Okay, so the question of that, and this is matter of just to me it's a superficial label. It's whether you are marketing yourself and getting your own business, or using an agency to do some marketing for you. So, and some of the agencies that I've worked with understands my position because they work with me for a long time, and they help market me for what my service stands for. So the understanding is there. So it's not just like here's a temporary worker and do that. It's as evolved. So I just want to say something on that.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. Jerry, any final comments?
Sure. I would encourage anyone who is seriously interested in starting a consulting practice to read up on some of the important things, like the sort of the business law aspect, and there's look for resources in advance. PATCA is one of them. The IEEE has a consultants group here in the Bay Area called the CNSV. There's several of these sort of nonprofit peer support organizations that you can get information from, and also make sure you have a good accountant, an attorney, and think about what your reserve. You really should think about what your cost of living is, your burn rate. If you have a mortgage, or if you have a young family, whatever your monthly burn rate is, I would recommend that you are able to set aside some number of months of reserve in case you have a dry spell, that you don't get yourself in trouble.
Yeah, that's always good. That's always good advice. All right, Rafa, any closing comments or?
I thought Jerry was really good there.
Yeah,
I just piggyback on some of his thoughts. So just trying to be brief here is that I would advise, again, this is, don't necessarily quit your day job, right? Don't really put yourself on the edge. But I think I would agree also with Perry in the sense that this is a different lifestyle, right? So perhaps if there's a middle ground is, kind of hold out your shingle. PATCA's an awesome, situation where, you can broker your services as needed and kind of get your feet wet. That's definitely one thing that I would consider before you go full into it. Maybe let's be honest, the corporations, the big law firms, they want to pamper you. And the reason why they want to pamper you is they don't want you to be consultant in a way, right? So they will bend over backwards to make sure things are easier for you, and they are, depending on your situation with families and everything. So it is a personal choice, and it depends on your personality. I have absolutely, I'm very happy of where my choice, but it may not, one size does not fit all. Don't quit your J job. I think those are the two big things to keep in mind. And then of course, lastly, the other thing too, again, is take a look at Digital Deputy Act, which is my newest pet project, which is to bring digital ethics across the board in the software industry.
Cool. All right. Thanks, Perry. Your any parting thoughts?
Well, yeah, you know, kind of going to echo what everybody else said because of the experiences we've all had have been somewhat similar. You know, I agree with Rafa. I didn't quit my day job, but it was only about 3 months transition before I did in starting the consulting. But first of all, consulting isn't for everyone. And
Yeah, that's fair.
it's a great lifestyle. It's been right for me. You're going to have high points and low points. You know, you're not going to have an employer that's going to smooth them out for you in a big corporation. You're going to ride the roller coaster yourself. So, you know, be prepared for, if you're not in a situation where you like that or that you can afford to do that, then it may not be the right time to start in consulting.
Yeah, good advice. Good advice. Okay, well, thanks everyone. I'm gonna say goodnight from the panel, and I'm gonna hand it over to the ACM folks. I don't know if they had any final comments, and thanks again for hosting us tonight. All right.
Sure. Let me just remind people again. Well, let me say thank you to Patka and to AI Camp and to all y'all on the panel. But aside from that, let me see if I can share my screen.
Yeah, sure.
To, where is that? I don't see.
Do I need to give it control to you or?
Well, if you're.
Oh,
you're
yeah,
not
you should be able to
sharing.
share. Yeah, if you hit the green button there, I think so.
Yeah, but
There you go.
there we go. Okay.
Okay.
So these were the couple of things I announced at the beginning. The networks, deep networks are kernel machines on Monday, and the Applied AI Summit from AI Camp coming up on the 24th, which is Wednesday of next week. And again, you can find out more about these at the SF Bay ACM meetup page, and hope to see you at these events. Thank you. Guess that's it. I'd say we're at the end unless someone has something else that they need to say.
Good luck, everyone.
All right. Yeah. Good luck. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you, everybody.